Imagine you wake up one morning and find yourself in the early 1800s. The world around you is starkly different from the one you know. No electricity, no modern conveniences, and the social norms are both unfamiliar and restrictive. For both men and women, the idea of surviving and even thriving in this time period presents unique challenges, but also significant opportunities. So what do you do? The first thing you must realize is that you're an outsider. Whether you're a man or a woman, you're going to have to blend in as much as possible at first. The 1800s isn't a time where radical changes are welcomed, and any sudden deviation from accepted norms could raise suspicion. Keeping a low profile initially is your safest bet, but how you go about this depends on whether you're trying to stay anonymous or if you're willing to use your knowledge of the future to your advantage. Step 1. Adjusting to your role in society. For men, the early 1800s offers a bit more freedom to move through society. You might decide to blend in by becoming a craftsman, farmer or trader, common professions of the time. Men were expected to work hard, provide for their families and engage in their communities. But this also comes with pressure to conform to strict social hierarchies and expectations. Unless you're from a wealthy background, you'll be living with very few luxuries. For women, however, the early 1800s was much more restrictive. Women's roles were centered around domestic duties, raising children, managing the household, and providing support to their husbands. Education for women was minimal unless you were from a wealthy family, and even then, it was more about refinement than knowledge. If you're a woman in this time, you'll have to adapt to a world where your public role is limited, at least on the surface. Step 2. Leveraging your knowledge of the future. If you decide to leverage your knowledge of the future, the key is subtlety. You can't start talking about electricity, the internet, or airplanes right away. Doing so would not only cause suspicion, but in some cases it could be outright dangerous. Instead, focus on smaller innovations and ideas that are within reach for the time. For instance, if you're a man, you could start by introducing simple yet revolutionary ideas in areas like farming, sanitation, or even construction. Crop rotation and better irrigation methods, which might seem basic to you, could make a huge difference in the agricultural world of the 1800s. Similarly, sharing early ideas about sanitation, like washing hands regularly, could have a massive impact on public health. Keep it gradual, and you'll become someone whose innovations are accepted as natural improvements, not witchcraft or magic. For women, your knowledge could be used in more subtle ways. Given the domestic focus of women's lives, you could introduce more efficient ways of managing households, whether through advanced cooking techniques, medicinal remedies, or even the idea of homeschooling children with more modern knowledge. If you're savvy enough to position yourself as a teacher or healer, you could gain a certain level of respect and autonomy in a time when women didn't often have that luxury. Step 3. Navigating relationships and alliances. No matter who you are, or how much knowledge of the future you decide to use, your success will depend on your relationships. Building alliances is critical. For men, this could mean forming bonds with other local business owners or craftsmen, securing a reputation as someone who's reliable, trustworthy, and innovative without raising too many eyebrows. For women, relationships were your social currency. You'd need to build trust with your family, neighbors, and other women in the community. Gaining a reputation as a resourceful homemaker, healer, or teacher would afford you more freedom and influence than many other women of the time could dream of. But always keep in mind that too much independence or innovation from a woman could attract negative attention, especially in more conservative areas. Step 4. Considering the risks of your knowledge. Using your knowledge of the future isn't without risks. The early 1800s were not an age of widespread enlightenment for all. Depending on where you find yourself, knowledge that is too advanced or perceived as threatening could get you labeled as an outsider, or worse. There's a fine line between appearing clever and drawing the wrong kind of attention. For example, if you introduce certain medical knowledge like antiseptics or basic surgery, people might accept you as a healer at first. But if you're too successful or too confident in your predictions, it might stir up fear. In some cases, you might be accused of sorcery or trying to upset the natural order of things. The repercussions of this could range from simple ostracism to something far more severe. And it's not just about social norms. If you start making money or gaining power through your innovations, others might see you as a threat. Men in power during this time were not above using force to protect their status, so you'll need to be cautious about how quickly and visibly you rise. Step 5. Thriving in the long term. To truly thrive, you'll have to strike a balance between using your knowledge of the future and blending in with the present. The key is patience. You'll need to identify safe opportunities to slowly integrate your future knowledge into 19th century life. Look for gaps where your modern insights can naturally fit in. For men, this might mean building a small empire by introducing new business methods, creating better tools, or even improving basic infrastructure like roads or bridges. In time, you could become a respected figure, perhaps even rising into the ranks of the local elite. But always remember, overstepping your bounds too quickly can bring you unwanted attention. Those in power will always be wary of anyone who rises too fast. For women, thriving in the early 1800s often meant mastering the social game. If you position yourself as an indispensable figure in your community, you might be able to open new doors for yourself and other women. You could subtly push boundaries by introducing educational opportunities for young girls or advocating for slightly more freedom for women in your social circle. However, doing this too overtly could cause backlash from a society that, for the most part, wasn't ready for women's rights. Step 6. Should you stay anonymous? Then there's the question of whether you should even try to leverage your future knowledge at all. Maybe you decide it's too risky. After all, the more you affect the world, the more you risk drawing attention to yourself. If your goal is to survive quietly and avoid the consequences of changing history, staying anonymous might be the best option. In this case, blending in fully means accepting the limitations of the time. As a man, you'll focus on survival, perhaps using only basic knowledge like better farming methods to ensure your livelihood without causing any waves. As a woman, you'll navigate your limited roles, leaning on community connections and taking a more subtle, behind-the-scenes approach to survival. Conclusion. Ultimately, surviving and thriving in the early 1800s depends on your approach. You have two primary choices: remain anonymous, blending into the world around you, or carefully use your knowledge of the future to your advantage. Both paths come with risks and rewards, and the repercussions of your choices could be far-reaching. Whatever path you choose, the key is to stay adaptable. History may be written, but with the right approach, you can navigate it and maybe even make a lasting mark on the world without becoming a victim of it.